we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, let us know if you wanted to come on the episode, or, you know, let us know about a topic you wanted to hear about or anything like that. We'd love to have you on here, or love to hear from you in the comments or in the DMs. Hit us up on the Bigmark podcast or at the Bigmark pod on Twitter or Instagram, respectively. Again, thank you all for being here. This is the best way you could possibly support the podcast, but if you want to keep supporting, make sure you like and subscribe and like the videos, and like I said, comment and engage with the podcast wherever you are listening to it. And if you want to go that extra mile, check out our patreon.com/bigmarkpod. There's a couple different ways to support the podcast there. So again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here. I'm super excited about today's episode in the sense that, you know, this is an artist that I've listened to for a long time, but me and the guys in the band were just kind of talking about it. And, you know, I love this with the boys in Reckless Harbor because we're, you know, traditionally set up as a folk band, you know, 4-piece, no drums, violin, fiddle, or I should say fiddle instead of violin, fiddle, banjo, acoustic guitar. I mean, I'm on bass, not an upright bass, but that's where we start to drift a little bit. But I wouldn't necessarily call our music super traditional folk, bluegrassy or anything like that. It's really cool. I love our eclectic backgrounds, and because of that, we seem to each always be bringing a band to the table that one of us has never heard, or one of us has listened to forever ago when we were kids, and it was a formative band that you know that's super important in our music, and we never really necessarily talked about it before, but then we make that connection later, and it's so cool. And I mean, that speaks to why our musical sensibilities work. But this artist came up just in talking, and one of our band members, Trevor, had heard of him, of course, because he's pretty famous, but hadn't quite done a deep dive. And then it kind of inspired me, at least, to start listening to his music again. And not that I hadn't done my deep dives before, but we'll be talking about Jeff Buckley today. And, you know, every artist begins somewhere, you know, not always with a stage, sometimes with a silence. Before the crowds, before the myths, there was just a boy carrying a famous last name he never truly got to understand. This is where the story of Jeff Buckley really starts. Not music, but in absence. So he's born in 1966 in Anaheim, California, son of folk musician Tim Buckley. And that's the thing, is that his parents were split up. He was raised primarily with his mother and stepfather. And a lot of his emotional themes, not only that he felt that he was in a lot, or that was, you know, maybe this is what people kind of observed about Jeff, is that his identity, his abandonment, his artistic inheritance was always kind of in question. It was always something he was constantly thinking of. And it's really interesting. I mean, again, you know, Tim Buckley being a famous folk musician before, it is hard when your parent is successful in the field that you are also in. Now, I don't have much experience, but I did grow up playing basketball in Hamilton here. My dad also played a lot of basketball in Hamilton. My dad was an excellent basketball player, very different basketball player, different body shape and size and abilities. But he was pretty well known. I mean, it didn't come up a lot. It wasn't like, constantly, you're Mark Krasinski's son. I mean, my name's fucking Mark Krasinski, so no one had to really guess. But, you know, I knew a lot of refs that knew my dad. I knew basically all my coaches knew my dad, and, you know, he was around, and there was a respect that I could tell, and he was a coach as well, and there was a respect there for sure. Now I played football up to university, so I guess you could call that my main sport, or at least that's the sport that I did the most with. And, that's kind of where I noticed once I got to university, it wasn't so much, I didn't really feel like I was under anyone's shadow per se. But again, like I said, you know, it's just something where it does come up. I don't know. Maybe my experience is the same as a lot of these guys, but, you know, you think of, you know, fucking Michael Jordan's son, you think of, goddamn it, LeBron James' son. I can't help but think about basketball players. But again, you know, this whole idea of this is the, you know, there's an expectation already. If people know, where you came from, it happens with kids in school with brothers and stuff, and older siblings and sisters and stuff. And it's like, oh, you're so-and-so's brother or sister. Oh, you're going to be just like this person. Like, it's kind of a dumb thing that humans think about, but it is what it is. A lot of early influences on Jeff, Led Zeppelin was big for him, Nina Simone, Edith Piaf, and he was really big into jazz and classical. And again, that's the thing, like we mentioned, inheriting mythology before earning your own identity is really interesting. You kind of have to end up reinventing yourself before you even know yourself. And, reinvention requires distance, sometimes from places, sometimes from ghosts. In the early 90s, New York City was proving ground for dreamers with cracked guitars and impossible ambitions. And somewhere in the dim candlelight of a tiny cafe, a voice began to rise, not loudly, but undeniably. So Jeff started kind of figuring out his own way. He kind of started doing his best to learn, and he moved to New York City in the 1990s. He had a residency at Sine Cafe in the East Village. He started building somewhat of an underground following, and again, his performance style was so interesting, and he had this like really interesting tremolo in his voice. And his performance style is kind of described as anywhere between spiritual and hypnotic. And he's kind of known for these gender bending covers that he would bring in these songs that maybe no one would genre bending, gender bending. Oh my God, these genre bending covers. Again, that was like kind of like you didn't necessarily know, right away maybe what the song was until he started singing it. Or that's one of my favorite ways to do covers is find a way to do the cover where no one necessarily recognizes it right away. In fact, if no one recognizes it and just thinks it's another song, and then you realize it's a fucking cover after, that's ultimate, really. But you want people to fucking get with the program. But his raw emotional delivery was the biggest thing. And again, this is the interesting thing. There's something about building your craft and working on your craft in obscurity and all of a sudden being discovered too, right? It's like, it's hard. You want to make sure you're ready for things. You're ready. You're built up. You've practiced. You've prepared. And once you get that call, you're going to be ready to answer it. But sometimes you got to answer that call before, and it will thrust you into being prepared. So in 1994, he started working on his album Grace. I mean, his only studio album. I wish it's his greatest album, but it's his only studio album. He signed with Columbia Records and started working on it. Grace is one of those famous albums, right? It's has alternative rock textures, ethereal guitar layers, operatic vocal intensity. Again, it's like wonderful songs, amazing songs. Grace, of course, the title track, fantastic. Last Goodbye, oh my God. Of course, Hallelujah, the Leonard Cohen cover, which Jeff was famous for. But Lover You Should Have Come Over is my particular favorite song on the album, and it's just the album truly is an emotional cathedral, and that Lover You Should Have Come Over, I think, is this linchpin where it's interesting too. It almost reminded me a lot of the Rodriguez album. Sixto Rodriguez did a few songs where there was some interesting instrumentation, let's just put it that way. I think there was like an oboe used at some point, and just interesting stuff. And in that documentary Searching for Sugarman, they talked to some of the people who made the record with Rodriguez. Excuse me. And they kind of said, maybe we picked the wrong instrument. Sometimes you think about that, right? Like, why didn't things hit? Why isn't a song that is so good, all the people working on it believe in it and think it's great, why doesn't that become sick? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe it is the instrumentation, maybe it is the genre. There's so many different things, right? Because I mean, nowadays genre is a lot of a bit of a looser term. But certain times, genre was really specific. People said, oh, I don't listen to that genre. I'm not even going to go there, and I'm not even going to listen to that radio station, so don't even try to come at me. Anyway, so I think about that because on Lover Should Have Come Over, it's excellent, but it's all, I think he uses either like a pump organ or like a straight up accordion, and I don't think that that's bad. I think that's one of the reasons why the song is great, but I always thought that it's such an interesting textural layer on there that did work, whereas Rodriguez maybe didn't work. So sometimes you do have to take these, in my opinion, it's a bit of a leap, and it's a unique idea to even come up with that and put that as the texture, because when you listen to that song, it creates this beautiful kind of background texture that the rest of the song, leaps off of. So anyway, fantastic. And great art rarely explodes overnight, and sometimes it does linger, much like Grace did, drifting quietly through headphones and late night drives until the world realizes what it almost missed. Grace was never just music. It was a slow burning revelation. Now, the critical reception of Grace was great. Initial modest commercial performance. I mean, it did well. It was sitting in the, that singer-songwriter type vibration, 94. You were starting to see that. Obviously, you had grunge would have been one of the more popular genres at the time, of course. So, if not the most popular, and rock. So to have a little bit more feeling and a little bit, which would have been a little bit of a deviation from things, I'm sure. Critics, of course, always highlighted Jeff's vocal range and authenticity. Gradual recognition as one of the greatest albums started kind of building even in the 90s. And of course, you can't help but talk about the influence on later alternative and art rock bands. I mean, he's just, you talk about your Hosiers, and you talk about your John Mayers, even. You talk about a lot of these people who are singers with guitars, James Bay, these type dudes. There's tons of influence there. There's got to be. And of course, the cult audience grew much through live recordings and word of mouth. Actually, one of my favorite albums by him is Mystery White Boy, which was released, and he as a live album. It was a recording of one of his shows, and really well done. It has a beautiful rendition of Hallelujah on there, my favorite version that he does, in my opinion. And he does this with this. He does this kind of melody with I Know It's Over. Really interesting, beautiful song, and he kind of moves it back into Hallelujah. Really, really, really cool. And again, like I said, this was an interesting time for this, and maybe the art did arrive before the culture was ready. But generally speaking, success is supposed to bring clarity. But for certain artists, it only deepens the questions. Memphis wasn't an escape. It was a laboratory, a place where Jeff Buckley was preparing to become something even more dangerous and more honest. Now, Jeff did move to Memphis. He relocated to Memphis to work on his second album, on My Sweetheart the Drunk, the working title. He started exploring darker lyrical territory and heavier sonic direction. But the creative pressure from label expectations was there. Labels expected you to at least match your first album, if not do better. And that pressure can definitely grow. But there were signs of this rapid artistic evolution that was happening. And it was really exciting to see the potential of Jeff. And the tension between expectation and authenticity it always seems to exist. It's very hard to not feel contrived. It's very hard to not feel like you're a fucking hack sometimes when you do have to make something, or when you try to make something with intention. But sometimes you have to let things flow. You can't be creative without just allowing things. So, history is full of turning points we never see coming. A step taken casually, a moment that feels ordinary until it isn't. On a quiet night by the river, the future of one's music, most singular voices slipped beneath the surface, leaving only echoes behind. Unfortunately, in 1997, Jeff and his team, May 29th, the band flew to Memphis to join him in his studio to work on new material. Later that evening, Buckley spontaneously went swimming, fully dressed, in the Wolf River Harbor, singing the chorus of Led Zeppelin's "Whole Lotta Love" under the Memphis Suspension Railway. Keith Foti the roadie in Buckley's band remained on shore, After moving her radio and guitar out of reach from wake of a passing tugboat, Fody looked up to see Buckley had vanished. The wake of the tugboat had swept him away from shore and underwater. A rescue effort that night and the next morning by scuba teams and police was unsuccessful. On June 4th, passengers on the American Queen riverboat spotted Buckley's body in the Wolf River, caught in branches. Yikes. Buckley's autopsy showed no signs of drugs or alcohol, and the death was ruled an accidental drowning. The official Jeff Buckley website published a statement saying his death was neither mysterious nor a suicide. So, sudden loss obviously halted, his rise, and an immediate shift from emerging icon to mythical figure. He did become this exalted figure, obviously frozen in time, and rightfully so. And, it's always interesting. This is the thing. This is the saddest thing and the worst thing you can say is that nothing does better for an artist's album sales than them dying. And not only just album sales, but just people looking. And you know what? It's not necessarily a sinister thing. It's not necessarily a morbid thing. I think, it just brings attention, and you go, hey, I'm going to go listen to this guy's stuff. I'm going to go listen to this artist's stuff. I've never heard of them before. This is a sad story and I want to see what they did. Or, hey, I'm going to listen to them because this is the memory, blah, 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 all these different things. So I don't think it's necessarily bad, but obviously you just don't want anyone to fucking die. Some endings feel fine, while others feel unfinished, like a song fading out before the last note resolves. In the years that followed, Jeff Buckley didn't disappear. He multiplied through speakers, through influence, through the fragile permanence of recorded sound. Now, there was release of unfinished recordings and archival material. Grace continued to rise on the greatest albums ever list. Hallelujah became a global emotional album, and his archetype was established, the romantic, transcendent artist. Immortality through recorded vulnerability. Super interesting. I think that's the thing, is that music is fleeting. It only does exist in between our ears. And yes, we can record it on albums and MP3s and whatever the fuck you want to call it. But live sound's where it's at, and that's only experience in the moment. And to think that you can leave some type of permanence on this earth by recording an album and having it out there, and people can go back and visiting it is pretty special. And I think that is a beautiful way, a beautiful legacy to leave. And Jeff Buckley sure did that. Maybe greatness isn't measured in decades. Maybe it's measured in emotional aftershocks. Jeff Buckley stayed for only a moment in musical history, but his moment never stopped expanding. Go listen to some Jeff Buckley, everyone. Put on a little candle. Relax. It's beautiful stuff. Anyway, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Peace.